All right, this one's going to be sort of a little, I don't know if I want to call it fun topic, but it'll get a little bit off the beaten path. I wanted to do a little something. Again, Will asked me to take at least something of a lecture I did last year somewhere else and include that here. Really, that focuses on pop culture and how certain religious ideas are being mediated or communicated in pop culture. And again, you're going to see connections to certain points of Gnosticism in this, but you'll see connections to other things as well. And so, science fiction and cinematic theology, what I want to focus on is because of the influence of media, especially entertainment media, what are people going to be thinking, in the next generation? Again, people who are sort of raised on media, that really get their information, again, from YouTube, from movies, from television shows, and there's a plethora of these kinds of shows today that are taking very familiar theological ideas, very familiar religious ideas, whether it be from Judaism or Christianity or something else, and they're recasting them, recrafting them, reframing them in certain ways to communicate certain ideas. In other words, to steer people's thinking in a certain direction. That is, ultimately, in many cases, away from anything we would sort of call a traditional Judeo-Christian theology, a biblical theology. But yet, what's being given to the public has certain attachments to those ideas. It's just that they're reframed and recast. So what I want to talk about here is who or what is or are the deity or the deities for the post-Christian person. Because we live in a post-Christian culture right now. Christianity is losing, and I would say has lost its cultural dominance. Even though that sounds negative, I think it's true, or if it's not true now, it'll probably be true in 10 or 20 years. So what is that going to be replaced with? How are people going to be thinking? And that's the fundamental question here. What's the deity or the deities? What does salvation mean? And how is this theology communicated? So let's start with the deity first. I mean, lots of people would opt for nature as being the replacement for traditional theism. And the academic term for this would be monistic paganism. Monistic, again, is the idea that everything is one. There is no clear-cut distinction between creator and creation. All is one. And that's really what paganism is at its heart, whether it be nature worship that's very overt, or again, sort of making God an impersonal force that operates within nature. That's monistic paganism. And we already see this kind of thing in the Green movement, and this is historical as well as contemporary. This is nothing new. Just a few books that you might be interested in. The Green Gospel, the New World Religion. Again, a lot of these things are going to gravitate toward uniting all religions around a certain central idea or a small set of ideas. And there are a number of religion scholars who see the Green movement as being a possible uniting force that sort of will preempt certain parts of different religions' belief system. But this is the thing that will sort of run through all of them, or at least be able to sort of take over all of them and unite into one, again, monistic system. Other books that discuss the same thing, again, most of these are academic titles. Dark Green Religion, Nature, Spirituality, and the Planetary Future. I want to show you some of these because people, again, scholars of religion, this isn't just like pop apologetics here by Christians who hate environmentalism, all right? These are serious scholars who see the trend, and they see the open door and the trajectory of the thinking. And so they're studying it. That's what scholars do. So nature, spirituality, and the planetary future. This Sacred Earth, Religion, Nature, Environment, again, is a fairly popular tome on this topic. The Great Cosmic Mother, Rediscovering the Religion of the Earth. All of these are academic presses or academic publishers, either university presses or other academic publishers. These are all serious books. Again, this is not, Billy Bob published something on his website and sent it to Zulu. Okay, and I'm not showing you that stuff. I'm showing you the real stuff that's being discussed in the academy. Nature is enough, religious naturalism and the meaning of life. And for a lot of people, this is going to be the orienting principle. Really, their God. The planet will be their God. Gaia, the mother, the whole idea. That's where a lot of people mentally and theologically and spiritually are going or have gone. In this category, I would put something called the monistic biocosm view. This is probably a little less well known. This is the book by James Gardner, obviously called Biocosm. The subtitle reads, The New Scientific Theory of Evolution. Intelligent life is the architect of the universe. Okay, the universe essentially makes itself, but not quite. Wait till you see what Gardner says. Gardner is a graduate of Yale Law, Yale College, studied philosophy, theoretical biology. He's not a scientist by training, but he has published scholarly articles, peer-reviewed articles in science journals. The quote up here, Martin Rees, who's the Astronomer Royal, promoting his book. Gardner is sort of a darling by certain people in the science community to popularize this idea, biocosm. Here's a quote about the book. Science writer and amateur cosmologist Gardner proposes a startling theory that a, catch this, pre-existing super intelligent race that inhabited a mother universe created this one and tweaked the physical laws in its baby universe to ensure the continuity of intelligent life and of the cosmos itself. So all that you think or we think we know about the universe was put here by intelligent design. You see how they just deftly stole the intelligent design argument? Of course it's intelligently designed, but it's not by a god. It's by a super intelligent race from some other universe that created this one and fine-tuned it so that it functions really well on its own. And that universe itself will produce intelligent life forms. That's you and me. So we've just taken intelligent designer and put an S on it. Okay? It's real simple. And I have been waiting, I have been lecturing about this for years because it was very apparent to me 10 years ago or whatever that the intelligent design movement, as much as I like it, is going to be really easy to steal. And this is, again, probably the most well-known popular example, but it's still, again, it's an academic work, but, it's promoted by scientists, even though Gardner is not a scientist. Very easy to do. And a technological culture like ours that is already predisposed to the idea of, the giant spaghetti monster in the sky, as Richard Dawkins likes to refer to God as. This idea that there's this man running around somewhere in space or whatever, other dimension, who's God. Since they reject all that, this is a nice workable alternative. Now, some are going to be totally materialist and aren't going to buy the extraterrestrial thing, but most astronomers, this is so obvious. You can literally see this every day in the news if you're getting your news online. Every day there's going to be some article promoting life elsewhere in the universe. Okay, especially now, we have water on Mars, and so we go from water to, an intelligent race, with cell phones or something somewhere else. Just this huge leap in logic, but that it gives the thought legitimacy. Why? Because the idea is that life here evolved from microparticles or whatever that produced us. Well, why can't the same process work somewhere else? It's very simple thinking. And in the scientific community, it's considered very coherent thinking. And so, if there isn't an extraterrestrial race out there, well, maybe this works. We get to have gods, but not be really accountable to that God. And another one by Gardner as well, The Intelligent Universe, AI, Artificial Intelligence, E.T., we know who that is, and The Emerging Mind of the Cosmos. This is sort of his follow-up volume. Some would say, no, our God isn't going to be nature, it's going to be ourselves, our inner space, our intuition. Here are some popular books. Again, you may not have heard of either of these authors, but DMT, The Spirit Molecule, A Doctor's Revolutionary Research into the Biology of Near-Death and Mystical Experience. Okay, basically, that what you think of as God is some little part of your brain that gets stimulated by certain events. Or drugs. Okay? Hallucinatory drugs. Terence McKenna was a well-known figure in the LSD movement. And this was his thing. Search for the original tree of knowledge, a radical history of plants, drugs, and human evolution. Basically, that religion derives from mystical experiences brought on by the use of drugs. And you can have those experiences right now for $19.95. No, it's not like that. You have to go get your LSD somewhere else. Okay? But you get the idea. So the deity is really inside us to be discovered through our minds. You know, and our mind, and then they'll fill in the gaps with New Age talk. Our minds are eternal, and we'll go back to the great realm of consciousness. And here you get your Gnostic tie and all that stuff. So that's a possibility. Another possibility under the ourselves category is technological transhumanism. This is probably one that more people have heard of. The merging of man and machine and all that sort of talk. Really propelled largely through the influence of this man. Anybody recognize him? This is Ray Kurzweil. Okay. Even a guy like Glenn Beck, talks about Ray Kurzweil. Everybody talks about Ray Kurzweil, it seems. Kurzweil is an inventor. He's an entrepreneur. He's a public intellectual, a science guy. He's sort of a Renaissance man, actually. But he's the major figure promoting transhumanism, that we need to use technology to defeat death, to become more than what we are. He talks about the singularity a lot. That moment when artificial intelligence and computer technology merges with humanity. We're no longer able to keep ahead of it. We essentially have to merge with it. The guy on the right is Peter Thiel. His parents were missionaries. He claims to be a Christian now. He's gay. He's a enthusiastic promoter of transhumanism. He's also the founder of PayPal. Okay, he has lots of money. And he puts it into transhumanist efforts. He believes, his argument is actually theological. He believes that it's part of the creation mandate for us to be like gods. Okay, because isn't that our destiny as believers? Aren't we going to be transformed and glorified? Isn't the earth supposed to be Eden? Well, all the answers to all those questions are yes in biblical theology. So he's like, well, let's go to it. Okay? We need to transform ourselves to really escape humanity, become more than human, to become as much like God as we can. Because that way we can image him better. It's the destiny of our image. Okay, that we're God's imager. So he actually makes a theological argument for transhumanism. But he's one of these guys you probably never heard of unless you happen to read the Small Matter, PayPal or something like that. Just books, Religion and Transhumanism, The Unknown Future of Human Enhancement. The Singularity is Near, Kurzweil's famous book. When Humans Transcend Biology. And this is something I would recommend you watch. It's a movie documentary, Transcendent Man. It really just follows Kurzweil around and tells his story. And he's actually a really sympathetic figure. He's not like the demon or the devil or something like that. He's really driven by the loss of his father. He wants literally to bring his father back. And he is driven by this. And personally, again, he's a very sympathetic figure in the film. He's invented lots of inventions that have helped millions of people all over the world. Again, he's very wealthy, like Theo. But this is the thing that drives him, transhumanism. So I recommend it. It's really worth watching. Another book, Regenesis. If you read, especially my latest novel, The Quartet, I talk about synthetic biology. This is sort of the primer for synthetic biology. If you don't know what synthetic biology is, right now we have the capability to read DNA. Synthetic biology is the ability to write it, to literally, from the atomic level on up, create life forms that have never existed before and that can't naturally exist. Okay, this will make us as gods in a very real sense. And people are doing synthetic biology now on a very small scale. It's not an easy thing. But George Church, who I believe he's either at Harvard or MIT, I can't remember right now off the top of my head, but this is his book introducing the concept as best he can on a more popular level, rather than having grad students. Engines of Creation, Coming Era of Nanotechnology. This is one of the formative, sort of, again, popular academic books to talk about nanotechnology, which is the science of the extremely small. Okay, so you make, engines that are, a nanometer, which is like, I don't know, what is it, 100,000th width of a human hair or something like that. And you can only see them operate under a high-powered microscope, but they're functioning machines. So there's all sorts of things you could do with nanotechnology. The way here, I came across another article on nanotechnology where they were trying to, the idea was they're trying to take they're trying to take cancer-fighting agents, drugs, but actually transform them into what the body will interpret as blood cells, and so that they will sort of live among the infected areas and actually sort of merge with them, and then by definition get rid of the cancer at a cellular level. But they're little machines. I mean, we just don't think this kind of thing is possible. You can go to a grad school and do this and get a degree. Okay, nanotechnology is here. Synthetic biology is not quite where nanotechnology is, but that's also here. And for the transhumanists, this is awesome. Because let's just simple application. Why do people die? I mean, other than accidents, okay, it's going to be age, which just means your body breaks down at a cellular level. Okay, that's what aging is, or disease. Okay. Well, what if we could somehow figure out why cells die, and then either retard or reverse the process at a cellular level? Then, unless you do something stupid or you get hit by a car, you're not going to die. You do the same thing with disease. Again, this is the Kurzweil vision: immortality, or again, extending human life potentially to extraordinarily long lifespans, and ultimately, something that we would look at as immortality. Again, you could get injured and get killed and all that kind of stuff, but the course of a natural life being indefinite, because your body will just keep reversing the effects of aging at a cellular level. That's ultimately what transhumanists are thinking about. And they're thinking about other bizarre things, like taking properties of animals, giving them to ourselves, through genetic manipulation. I said to Will, "Won't you want to be Spider-Man?" But I mean, it's a cartoon, it's a comic book, but that's actually the kind of things they're talking about. doing something to our soldiers in the military so that they don't have to sleep. This is where the discussion's at now. So that they don't get tired. That'd be great if a soldier never got tired. Well, why do we have to sleep? How does our body work? What makes it sleep? If it doesn't sleep, what are the harmful effects? Can we reverse those? Can we retard those? How about, little ants can carry 8 times their body weight. Well, how do they do that? What enables that? What physiologically enables that? Can we do that with a human? It's just questions like that. They're just asking very simple, straightforward questions. Now that the ability to again, change DNA is on the table. Of course, this, you don't even have to change it. You just write it yourself. You make what you want. It's a designer kind of thing. So we talked about nature, we talked about ourselves, either inner transformation or escaping what we are as humans, augmenting ourselves. Some will say, though, that the deity of the future that they prefer is the transcendent other. And that is something that isn't human by definition. So the obvious go-to choice here is artificial intelligence. Again, just a sample of the discussion in the book. Our final invention. Don't you just love the title? Artificial intelligence and the end of the human era. Others, though, would prefer the extraterrestrial as the transcendent other. Of course, Gardner's book has them both in his title, the AI, ET, and the cosmic intelligence and all that stuff. Now, this book I highly recommend. James Herrick is an evangelical scholar. He's a communications scholar in Michigan. And this is a terrific book because what he does is he goes through, again, not just, he does a little bit with popular media, like movies, but it's really sort of an intellectual history of how the idea of extraterrestrial life has been used and is being used to sort of re-articulate traditional religion. So it's a really nice overview of that idea. Other books, again, these are all academic presses, even though this one's cover looks kind of silly. Springer is a major academic publisher. Beyond UFOs, the search for extraterrestrial life and the astonishing implications for our future, vast universe, extraterrestrials and the Christian revelation. This is kind of a boring read. It's a typical Catholic view of this, but it's a mainstream title. Religions and extraterrestrial life, how will we deal with it? Okay. Academics are talking about this. 2 years ago at the Society of Biblical Literature / American Academy of Religion meeting, which was in Baltimore, they devoted an entire afternoon, a 4-hour session to astrobiology and the implications of extraterrestrial life for religion. Okay, I went to it. Some people I knew there, some people I'd never heard of before, but I went to it because, I never thought I would see that at the AAR meeting. So it was for real? Yeah, it was for real. And then again, I wanted to sit in on. I've read a lot of material, academic material on this question. So I wanted to meet a few people and just hear the papers. This is a mainstream discussion. Okay, this is not Ancient Aliens on the History Channel with Giorgio with the freaky hair. Okay, this is a mainstream academic discussion. These titles, again, all academic titles: Alien Worlds, implications of what I can't read my little small thing. Social and religious dimensions of extraterrestrial contact, ET culture, and an anthropology perspective. What would ETs be like culturally? It's all speculation, but again, they're trying to take an anthropological approach. This one is really interesting. Contact with alien civilizations, our hopes and fears about encountering extraterrestrials, because Michael Michaud, well, I'm not going to click out to the link, was one of the chief architects of the United Nations language and policy on what happens if we encounter extraterrestrials. Okay, so that alone makes the book interesting. Evolution from space. Okay, panspermia is sort of a subset of this transcendent other. And it dovetails a little bit with where Gardner was at with biocosm. Extraterrestrials created this universe. Panspermia is a little less ambitious. Panspermia is just the idea that extraterrestrials seeded life on this planet. It's not as big as creating the whole universe like Gardner's talking about. But evolution from space, Sir Fred Hoyle and Chandra Wickramasinghe, who is still, I don't know about Hoyle, but Wickramasinghe is still alive and kicking and really excited about, finding water on Mars. He promotes panspermia everywhere. He's a scientist, he's an astrobiology guy. Life itself, its origin in nature, Francis Crick. Anybody know who Francis Crick is? He's one of the co-discoverers of DNA. Okay. He believed panspermia, that we were, our life here on the planet was seeded by aliens, was a worthwhile idea to think about. He'll actually say things like the genetic code is just so complex, it just couldn't have evolved randomly. It had to be created by intelligent designers. God forbid we go to God, so we've got to make it the extraterrestrial. But he's the co-discoverer of DNA. Here's a paper, front page of it anyway, it's a screenshot, by Crick and Leslie Orgel on directed panspermia. There's actually more than one view of panspermia. Undirected is sort of its accidental life. Little microbial particles are floating around in space and they just randomly land here on Earth and poof, there we get life. Directed panspermia is the idea that aliens came here and planted life. Okay, so this is a peer-reviewed journal article. Icarus is the journal, back in the 70s. Crick and Orgel on directed panspermia, laying out why they think this is reasonable, a reasonable alternative. Now, again, we're talking about what is the deity or the deities, again, to a post-Christian generation. And I came across a couple of years ago something called the Cosmist Manifesto. See if some of this doesn't sound familiar. The author is a fellow named Gertzel. Here are the tenets of the Cosmos Manifesto. Humans will merge with technology to a rapidly increasing extent. A new phase of the evolution of our species. Humans will develop sentient AI, artificial intelligence, and mind-uploading technology. Well, why would we want that? Well, that permits an indefinite lifespan to those who choose to leave biology behind. Humans will spread to the stars and roam the universe. We'll meet and merge with other species out there. 4, humans will develop interoperable synthetic realities, virtual worlds able to support sentience and self-awareness. Some uploads will choose to live in virtual worlds, and some won't. The distinction will blur. Humans will develop space-time engineering and scientific future magic, much beyond our current understanding and imagination. Space-time engineering and future magic will permit achieving by scientific means most of the promises of religions and many amazing things that no human religion ever dreamed. Eventually, we'll be able to resurrect the dead by copying them to the future. Create a new folder. Control-C, Control-V. Intelligent life will become the main factor in the evolution of the cosmos to steer it toward an intended path. Are you getting warm, fuzzy feelings yet? Technological advances will reduce material scarcity. Of course. It'll give us the utopia. It'll give us Eden. No want, all abundance. New ethical systems will emerge based on principles including the spread of joy, growth, and freedom through the universe. All these changes will fundamentally improve the subjective and social experience of humans. Of course, they'll never have any bad results. What could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? Again, nature is our God. We're our own gods, or the transcendent other. either created by us, either augmenting ourselves, or our extraterrestrial saviors will show up at some point and take care of all of our problems and vault us to the next stage of human evolution. Those are the gods of the future. And really, in some ways, the present. What is the salvation of humankind then? Well, according to the Cosmos Manifesto, technological advances will reduce material scarcity drastically. So the earth will save us. Salvation means we finally take care of these problems of unequal wealth and food scarcity and all this environmental stuff. Technology will come along to cure all those ills. The earth will save us. Or we will save ourselves. Humans will develop sentient AI and mind uploading technology. We won't ever really die anymore. We'll either figure out a way through nanotechnology or synthetic biology to live indefinite lifespans, free of disease. And our technology will make sure that our environment is perfect. There'll be no want, no disease. And we'll be gods in our own Eden. And resurrect the dead by copying them in the future. So, in this view, humanity is not lost in sin. Well, there's really no such thing as sin. That's an antiquated notion. But they're just in the primitive stages of biological, spiritual, and social evolution. That's our problem. We're just relatively still primitive. Humanity in its present condition is a threat to itself, and it has to be saved by a greater intelligence. Now, I didn't put anything up here, but you realize what all this science talk is doing. It's legitimizing what some have termed a scientific dictatorship over the planet. A scientific elite, because they can deliver all these goods, they're the ones who need to be running the world. What could go wrong? So, a summary. Post-Christian theology, very monistic, all is one, there's no separate creator, unless you're Gardner and have your ETs, but then of course it asks the question where they come from. Probably other ETs. You have intelligent design without a personal God. ET gods are acceptable. To a materialist, to someone who doesn't believe in a theistic concept of God, an ET is an acceptable God because he's just so superior. Salvation by knowledge. Well, we've got monism, we've got salvation by knowledge. Well, what's the knowledge? Well, nature, science, and technology, just a different kind of knowledge. Not that we are ourselves divine, although we could actually say that, because if the ETs actually put us here and they are our gods, then yeah, we ought to be like joining them. We ought to be evolving to what they are. We ought to be becoming one with them, gods with them. So you can kind of, it's just a little technological tweaking, 21st century tweaking of Gnostic ideas. And ultimately, if we transcend humanity, we are, in some sense, beyond humanity. We become divine in that sense. We become gods. Space becomes the new heaven, purged of religion. Extraterrestrials are the new gods. Salvation is either ET contact or, again, evolving beyond what we are. And the result is the new Eden, just like the Bible says. Just like the book of Revelation is. No scarcity, disease, or death. So how are these ideas, again, communicated? Again, when we go through pop culture, again, I don't want you to think that, Mike thinks like every movie is sinister. I don't think most of them are sinister. Deliberately sinister. What they're trying to do, and what they do really well, is they get you to think about God or gods, again, whatever that thing is beyond humanity, in a new way. That actually fits into a non-theistic, traditional theistic paradigm. So you redefine who the gods are, what a god is. You put your faith, again, in the ones who can give you that advanced scientific knowledge, the knowledge of the gods. Okay. Or you evolve to that point yourself. Or you're augmented, you augment yourself through transhumanism. Again, these basic ideas, redefining what it means to be human, redefining who God or the gods are, creating a path through human participation or endeavor. Really, in some of these scenarios, humans are the architects of the new Eden, or they have help from ET. Again, all these biblical themes about becoming divine, imaging God, new Eden, global Eden, no scarcity, utopia, all this perfection, heaven come to earth, they're just all redefined, okay, into new ways that turn out to be very antithetical to biblical theology. This is Carl Sagan in the 70s. There is today, this was in the 70s, in a time when old beliefs are withering, a kind of philosophical hunger, a need to know who we are, how we got here. There's an ongoing search, often unconscious, for a cosmic perspective to humanity. It's over 40 years ago. I'd say that's quite true still today. Kurzweil was a little more abrupt. We need a new religion. Usually a man of lots of words, but pretty well summarizes it there in a few. This is going to be Herrick. Again, he's the Christian author of Scientific Mythologies. He says, there is an emerging canon of transcendent stories that provides meaning to our lives, the myth-making work of two powerful engines of cultural influence, speculative science and the works of science fiction. They are present to us a much-needed alternative to more traditional perspectives on God, people, and the destiny of the human race. An alternative that will open a spiritual pathway to the increasingly technological future. I mean, that's exactly what we see. Now, I want to introduce you to this guy. This is Jeffrey Kripal, who teaches at Rice, PhD is from the University of Chicago Divinity School. He is in the academy one of the leading voices to promote these ideas to academics. We're going to get to pop culture in a moment. This is his book, Mutants and Mystics, Science Fiction, Superhero Comics, and the Paranormal. He's also the author of a book called Authors of the Impossible. It's an intellectual defense of the paranormal. Okay. Kripal is a serious scholar. Teaches philosophy and religious thought. This is a very dense book. Okay, unless you're used to reading really highbrow academic stuff, I don't recommend it. But it's pretty awesome in terms of if you can handle that kind of thing, it's quite good. He covers the gamut of all sorts of stuff. Again, in the paranormal orbit, comic books, how these things become vehicles to again transmit these ideas through popular culture. And he is a practicing Gnostic as well. That is his faith. Kripal identifies a super story, a modern living mythology that underlies and shapes not only science fiction and superhero literature, but also contemporary American popular culture and particular beliefs concerning alien contact and humankind's place in the cosmic scheme of things. Kripal shows how American science fiction and fantasy fiction owes less to science than it does to 19th century esoteric traditions, like Theosophy, which borrowed from Gnosticism, earlier occult systems. This is really the value of what Kripal does. He's really familiar with the literature. Kripal also points out the first explicit claim of extraterrestrial intervention in human evolution is found in Madame Blavatsky's writings. Blavatsky was a prolific theosophist in the 19th century. Just quoted, everywhere. Advanced spiritual beings from Venus helped breed the Atlantean root race from the Lemurian root race. By the way, that's Ancient Astronauts. That's the History Channel. How is this communicated again? This goes all the way back. Look at the dates. This is the 18th century now, getting into the 18th century. Conversations on the plurality of worlds. Now, the discussion of the plurality of worlds is much older than this. It goes all the way back to Aristotle. Christian theologians like Augustine talked about other worlds all the time. And there were varying opinions on whether it was a legitimate idea or not. I think it's fair to say from the Middle Ages on to the advent of Darwinism, the idea of other worlds was embraced by the church, by the believing church. You can find famous Reformed evangelists and preachers promoting the idea. And it was because they thought to deny the idea was to limit or impinge upon God's omnipotence. Well, of course there could be other worlds. Why? We're not going to say God couldn't have done something. Okay, so that was the basic logic. It changed with the advent of Darwinism because then the scientific community began to apply evolutionary thinking to the idea of other worlds. And then the church it became icky to talk about. But the idea of sort of interaction between extraterrestrial races and our history is really traceable primarily back to this book, the 17th century. Here is, I think, an easier book to read. In fact, I know it's an easier book to read because I've read both of them. Our Gods Wear Spandex. Okay? A Secret History of Comic Book Heroes. This is a terrific book. Don't be misled by the cover. Of course, the cover is clever, The Last Supper, Da Vinci, and all that, with the comic book characters in here. What Knowles does is just goes through the history of comic books, all the way back into the 20s. It shows how their predominant themes are extraterrestrial gods, and in some comic book series, they're actually called the Archons. Comic book writers are not stupid; they're actually really bright. The guys who actually do the writing, some of them were just pretty awesome, to be honest with you. Very, very well read. And they're transmitting these older ideas for their audience in story form. That's all they're doing. It's all comic books on. Superheroes, of course, are part human or part non-human as well. They're evolving, they're mutants, they're technologically augmented. Again, you get the picture. And they're also sort of divinities in human form. Okay, for those of you who are older, you might be thinking of this example, 2001: A Space Odyssey, okay, Arthur C. Clarke. Of course, the ending scene where Dave, is sort of like transformed into this, fetus or infant, to go out and inhabit the stars and all that sort of stuff. And kind of creepy looking, but if you've seen the movie, you're familiar with the imagery. Again, doesn't it look curiously like the alien figure that you see? What a coincidence. Now they were lords of the galaxy and could rove at will among the stars. 2001. But today we have Iron Man. What is Iron Man? He's a transhuman. He's augmented a lot. And he's funny too. Who's Captain America? He's an augmented human. Remember, they stick the needle in him and he becomes this more than human person now. The Hulk is a sadly augmented human. Not according to his own volition, but by accident. Spider-Man, also by accident, is an augmented human. The X-Men, mutants, and augmentation, genetic freaks. Superman, of course, is not an augmented human. He's a god, an extraterrestrial god. This is the scene from the most recent Superman movie, when he goes back to Earth to save the Earth. It's a cruciform position. If you actually see it, again, it's very deliberate. He leaves the craft and he's like this. Then it goes back to Earth to save everybody. And it's just messaging. It's theological messaging. Thor and Odin, the All-Father, they are gods, extraterrestrial gods. Close Encounters. Christian minister. Have you ever seen Close Encounters? Okay, it's a favorite movie of mine. But when they finally encounter the extraterrestrials and they send humans aboard the ship, there's a scene where a Christian minister reads Psalm 91:11 before the humans that were chosen to join the aliens do so, which reads, "For he will command his angels concerning his angels, concerning you, to guard you in all your ways." Always just praying that the angels will protect them while they're gone with the ETs. Well, sure, you can read it that way, but you can also read it that the ETs are the angels. ET, of course, possesses powers to heal and fly, has a spiritual connection with little Elliot, and naturally rises from the dead. Isn't that nice? And have you seen Knowing? Don't laugh because it's Nicolas Cage, okay? You get so picked on, but this is really a great film. Again, if you like this sort of thing, if you like to watch science fiction, like I do, just for the messaging, okay? Knowing is about, let's see what time it is. I don't want to go too far over, 12:04. I'll just wrap it up here in a minute. But this is Nicolas Cage's little boy, and he finds a time capsule at school, something that the school had planned, like, X number 30 years or whatever before. So the kids dig this up and they all get, a little message, from the time capsule. And his is a sheet of paper with nothing but numbers on it. It's just weird. And the story is how the kid who created this X number of years ago would sort of just like trance out and just start writing numbers. Just rapid fire, a series of numbers. And it turns out that the numbers correspond to dates and the number of casualties at a tragedy. They're in combination. And Cage figures this out. So the kid was getting downloaded information about a series of tragedies throughout the last 30 years that all came true on the date with the exact number of casualties. In the end, the last one says EE with the date, which you find out means everyone else. It's the apocalypse. Okay? And of course, we have to be delivered from the apocalypse. This is a familiar, artist's rendition of Ezekiel's wheel. But today we have really good graphic capabilities. Today we have CGI. So if you want to do a rendition of Ezekiel's wheel, and these are the guys that show up at the house who never speak. It turns out they're angels, but they're not really angels, they're aliens. Okay? They're there to protect the kid. But you get this. I couldn't find a really good image of this. But this is the craft right here. And when it unfolds, you have a series of wheels surrounded by wings and creatures, with phase, it's the whole Ezekiel's wheel thing. But the kids are picked up, the little boy and his friend, to populate a new Eden. Okay, there's the tree of knowledge. Okay, right there, our Edenic utopia. Humanity will be saved from the apocalypse, and the earth burns up and everybody else is killed, except for the kids. Well, let me just quote one of the angel aliens. The only ones who are allowed to go with them are those who were called. They mentally have this connection. So the dad, Nicolas Cage, has to stay behind, but the kid gets to go. Prometheus is sort of an in-your-face example of this. This is the prequel to the Alien series of the 80s. Prometheus is just filled with Christian and real Christian, Gnostic, and Greek mythological symbolism. I don't have the time to really get into it, but if you look at, again, who's doing it, You got Ridley Scott up here. Damon Lindelof is the writer who also wrote some of these things, Star Trek, Cowboys and Aliens. He's very into the ancient astronaut kind of stuff, and this is the direction Ridley Scott takes his movie, takes Prometheus. Humanity was created by the engineers who go on a lifeless Earth, and the engineer here drinks something right here, and then his body disassembles. But his DNA, again, unites with the chemical elements here on Earth, and ultimately man is produced from the extraterrestrial. Interestingly enough, the engineers, when they get these messages or these symbols, and they go, find who their makers were, and people do in the story, they turn out to be giants, which is kind of interesting. And in movies.com, I'll end with this one. You go to an interview with Ridley Scott with movies.com, the interviewer says, "We had heard it was scripted that the engineers were targeting our planet for destruction because we had crucified one of their representatives. Jesus was an extraterrestrial. And that Jesus might have been an alien. Was that ever considered, Ridley?" We definitely did. And then we thought it was a little too on the nose. But if you look at it as our children misbehaving down there scenario, there are moments where it looks like we've gone out of control, running around with armor and skirts, which of course would be the Roman Empire. They've been long run, 1,000 years before their disintegration started to happen. And you could say, let's send one or more of our emissaries to see if we can stop it. Guess what? They crucified. That was in the original script of Prometheus. Ridley Scott is making a series of sequels to that prequel to keep the Prometheus series going that will eventually, ultimately lead up to the Alien series from the 1980s. But he's already released the new title for the next one, Paradise Lost. What do you think that's going to be about? If you actually watch Prometheus, again, the names of the characters, Mary, Elizabeth, the whole, there's just so much in there that is tagging things in the gospel story, or again, promotes a Gnostic perspective on something. Ridley Scott is being very deliberate in this regard. Is he evil? Is he that smart? Well, probably a little bit of both. This is what he wants to do, and he's being pretty transparent about it. So, and just go on Netflix, type in some words like supernatural or extraterrestrial. There's just TV shows, movies all over the place, promoting some aspect or multiple aspects of this kind of stuff that we talk about. So you say, well, nobody's going to really believe this. What's the big deal? Nobody's going to believe it. It's fun. I like to watch movies too. But the thing is, in our culture, the ideas that this promotes are already believed by many people. They've already divorced themselves from the Judeo-Christian God and what how we think of Jesus. They've already done that. That is ancient history. They have passed that milestone already. And what are they going to replace it with? Where is the faith then? Well, it's in nature. We have to save nature. It's in science. We have to do something with ourselves to save ourselves from ourselves. We have to be augmented. We have to transcend what we are as humans if we're going to survive. Or we have to go out and populate space. Maybe we'll be lucky enough to meet our makers there and the answers to all our problems. This is already part of modern thinking. This is not a leap. And it's just that movies like this help acclimate people to a certain set of ideas. They're not overtly hostile to this thing over here, but they just sort of erase it because they direct attention over here. And that's just how it's done. So, I don't want to tell you, don't go to a movie and enjoy it. You should go and you should watch it. You should think about what the messaging is. And some of the books I put up here would actually help you do that, because they'll just start things to go off in your head. I know why he's doing this. I know where that comes from. I know what he's going to connect it to. I know what they're going to do with this. It'll help you be a more intelligent viewer. So I'm not saying don't watch them. I'm saying do watch them, but be really cognizant of the messaging that's in there.